Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Muhammad Yunus is possibly the most famous person in Bangladesh, a South Asian country with a population of more than 170 million. He's considered the father of microfinance. That means handing out tiny loans to low-income or impoverished people looking to start businesses. The work earned him a Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 and a U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Offering himself as a guarantor, he withdrew a loan, paid off their debts, and founded Grameen Bank, a bank that has dispersed over $8 billion, lifting millions of people from poverty with microloans. Muhammad Yunus was just trying to help a village, but he somehow managed to change the world.
But now, the 84-year-old economist is facing a possible life sentence in prison. This January, Yunus was sentenced to 6 months in jail for violating labor laws. And he faces nearly 200 charges, including accusations of money laundering and embezzlement. He denies all of them. It's a battle with Bangladesh's government that's been raging long before January. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the country's most powerful politician, has publicly criticized Yunus for years. And questions about the source of that animosity have swirled, whether it's Yunus's influence abroad, political ambitions he's expressed in the past, or a genuine critical eye on his businesses.
The tone has only intensified over the years in terms of her seeing him not just as a threat of some kind, but also as someone who really just gets under her skin, someone who's created this public profile and has the backing of so much of the West, really.
Bloomberg reporter Schultz has been covering Yunus's story and met with him while he was on bail at his home in Dhaka.
He's facing serious allegations, but at the same time, he seemed fairly optimistic.
Our position always, we never committed these crimes. But it's there, so we have to go and fight those cases. Prime Minister looks at it in a different way. So basically, it became a smear campaign against me.
The government argues that the allegations have merit and that Yunus's businesses aren't nearly as clean as he claims. But his Western supporters say the cases against Yunus are politically motivated. It's become a diplomatic crisis. Many Western governments are close to Yunus. They see him as a stable voice for Bangladesh. And they fear that Sheikh Hasina has pushed the country in the direction of authoritarianism.
Welcome to the Big Take Asia from Bloomberg News. I'm Oanh Ha. Every week, we take you inside some of the world's biggest and most powerful economies and the markets, tycoons, and businesses that drive this ever-shifting region. Today on the show, how one of the most celebrated economists in the world went from winning the Nobel Prize to facing life imprisonment, and what his complicated saga could mean for Bangladesh's future. Muhammad Yunus grew up in Chittagong, the second largest city in Bangladesh.
He's from a pretty large family, and his father was a jeweler. Growing up, it was fairly idyllic. He moved to the U.S. in the 1960s on a Fulbright scholarship, and he remained there for a number of years, completing graduate studies and also teaching economics in Tennessee.
Bloomberg's Schultz told me how the poverty Yunus saw in Bangladesh would influence his life's work.
At that point in time, Bangladesh was one of the most impoverished pockets of the world. Throughout the 1970s, he would go out into villages and he would talk to people about the challenges that they faced overcoming poverty. And what he found is that many people had great ideas to build businesses, but they lacked the capital. He also found that a potential solution, the idea of giving a business loan to an entrepreneur, simply didn't exist. And when he brought that idea to local banks, they literally laughed in his face.
This idea Yunus was developing? Microfinance.
Microfinance is giving a loan to someone who lacks collateral, someone who can't approach a traditional bank, and someone who has a great idea that they want to implement. So it's a business loan, and it's used to scale some sort of idea that an entrepreneur has.
It was a revolutionary concept, one that went up against the conventional belief that people living in poverty were less likely to settle debts. And in 1983, Yunus established his own institution, Grameen Bank. It was his counter to that belief and a way to put his economic theories into practice. Yunus primarily made Grameen's microfinance loans available to women in remote areas of Bangladesh. And he found that they used that money more productively than men.
Bangladesh is a majority Muslim country, and they were typically very hierarchical. So in many cases, he would have to bring a female associate because the women in the village simply would not talk to him. They would fear censure from their husbands or from leaders in these communities. And once women did receive the money, because they were so used to managing households, they understood that this was another thing that had to be carefully managed in their lives, that they were less likely to spend it on things like alcohol, and that in many cases, the women were driving the economies of their families.
By 1998, Grameen Bank was lending more than $2 billion to millions of families. Yunus's unconventional views on banking earned him a nickname, Banker to the Poor. He's met and hosted global leaders, dignitaries, and business titans like Ted Turner, Ban Ki-moon, and the Clintons. Globally, Grameen Bank has inspired similar projects in more than 100 countries. And Yunus has evangelized his views to the world for decades, like in a speech he gave at Harvard Innovation Labs in 2012.
I just look at the conventional banks, how they do it. Once I learn how they do it, I just do the opposite. They go to the rich, I go to the poor. They go to men, I go to women. They go to the city center to do the business, I go to the remote village.
Microcredit and Yunus's work is widely seen as one reason why Bangladesh has managed to elevate itself to a lower middle income economy today.
But as Yunus's star rose, so did scrutiny of his work. In 2010, a Norwegian documentary accused Yunus of improperly moving nearly 100 million in donations to an affiliated business. He was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, but one key person latched onto the controversy and continued to question the effectiveness of Grameen Bank's loans, Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. In one of her sharpest rebukes of Yunus, Hasina, who was once his supporter, accused him of sucking blood from the poor. In 2011, under pressure from the government, Yunus resigned from his job as managing director of Grameen Bank. The government argued that he had exceeded the mandatory retirement age.
This is the institution that he founded. It's the institution that made him famous. And now the government was arguing that he had exceeded a mandatory retirement limit. At that point, there really was a shift in tone, and the government wasn't interested in entertaining the idea that Yunus should or could stay on at Grameen Bank.
Yunus challenged the order in court, but was rejected. And in 2012, the government amended a law that effectively brought Grameen under state control. Yunus went on to focus on a number of nonprofits under the Grameen Bank umbrella, like Grameen Telecom. It's a nonprofit that works to bolster mobile service in rural areas, and it's at the center of his current legal battle. But Yunus's legal war with Prime Minister Hasina seems to have just begun. As he faces numerous charges, Yunus is in limbo, on bail at home and waiting for the outcome of his pending trials. Kai wanted to understand whether any of these charges had merit and if there was a more complicated story there. So he visited Dhaka to hear from Yunus himself.
Everybody tries to find out what is the reason, why is she against me? Did I do something to her, to hurt her or something, hurt her interest? This, as I said, is a billion-dollar question.
After the break, Kai on his interview with Yunus and what the economist's long-standing feud with the prime minister could mean for the future of Bangladesh. Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, rose to fame pioneering microloans as a tool to fight poverty. He's currently facing trial in a money laundering case that could see him imprisoned for life. Bloomberg's Schultz interviewed Yunus at his home in the capital of Dhaka.
Hello, ki khabar, kemon achen?
His home was fairly modest considering his public profile. It's an apartment in a diplomatic quarter of Dhaka. It's on an upper floor of a high-rise. It's decorated with all kinds of travel mementos, pottery, portraits, pictures with his friends. He has a painting of him with his Nobel Prize.
Yunus says that he, his wife, and his younger daughter spend most of their time at home now. He was released on bail in January to appeal a sentence of 6 months in jail for labor law violations. And when he's not at home, he's in and out of court.
Look, I'm here. I'm accused of money laundering. I'm accused of forgery. I'm accused of stealing money and all those kinds of things. Our position always, we never committed these crimes. But it's there, so we have to go and fight those cases to establish our case that we never committed those crimes. Prime Minister looks at it in a different way, that then I'm the bloodsucker of the poor people. So basically, it became a smear campaign against me. Everybody tries to find out what is the reason, why is she against me? So explanation is, one is jealousy. She is not famous and I'm famous, that kind of thing. Another was political. She finds it a threat. I said, look, I'm not a politician. This is the last thing I will ever do.
Bloomberg reached out to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's office for comment, but she declined an interview. Bangladesh's State Minister for Information told Bloomberg that the charges against Yunus aren't political and, quote, the law is taking its due course. And Kai says Yunus's case and the outcome of this legal battle have real implications for Bangladesh and its emerging economy.
Many Western governments are close to Yunus. They see him as a stable voice for Bangladesh, and they fear that Sheikh Hasina has pushed the country in the direction of authoritarianism. And so there's this perception that if Bangladesh can go after its most famous citizen, frankly, that it could really go after anyone, including people who are investing in Bangladesh and setting up businesses. So there's a fear that there could be a chilling effect and that foreign direct investment, which has already taken a hit in Bangladesh over the past few years for various reasons, could fall even further. And that Bangladesh, which is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, may no longer look as promising as it once did.
For now, the entire Yunus household is on edge, awaiting his fate in court. At home, the family keeps a bag packed, just in case the house gets raided by authorities. And Yunus says they're prepared for any outcome.
Everything is affected in my personal life because this is not an easy thing. You have to go and spend your time in the jail, leaving your family back. And my wife is a dementia patient. She depends totally on me. She has no sense of the world around her. When I go to jail, what happens to her?
Yunus's life is very different from what he was used to. He was constantly traveling. Now he's often in Bangladesh.
Friends in those countries invited me to be there. They're insisting that I should leave the country. And my argument is here, look, I live here. This is where I began. This is all my colleagues who work with me. I can leave, but what happens to my colleagues? What happens to the work that we do? And I said, no, I'm not going to destroy everything that I built, and we'll continue. And I don't see why I cannot do that.
This is the Big Take Asia from Bloomberg News. I'm Oanh Ha. This episode was produced by Yang Yang, Naomi and Jessica Beck. It was mixed by Alex Sugiura and fact-checked by Naomi. It was edited by Aaron Edwards, Caitlin Kenny, and David Rocks. Additional reporting by Arun Devnath. Special thanks to Bloomberg's Originals team. Our senior producers are Naomi Shaven and Kim Gettleson, and our senior editor is Elizabeth Ponso. Nicole Beamster-Boer is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. Please follow and review the Big Take Asia wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps new listeners find the show. See you next time.